During the 17th century inside Istanbul's Topkapı Palace, women of the Ottoman imperial harem lived within a rigidly controlled hierarchy. In 1651, assassins entered the harem at night, found Kösem Sultan hiding, dragged her out, and strangled her inside the palace. That fear wasn't irrational. Most women serving in the imperial harem were enslaved members of the palace household, trained to obey an elaborate chain of rank, service, and protocol. Break the rules, insult a superior, steal, create a dangerous scandal, or get caught in a political fight, and punishment could mean humiliation, loss of position, removal from privileged service, confinement, transfer away from the center of power, or worse. And the higher the politics climbed, the uglier it got. First, forget the fantasies that the harem was basically a giant bedroom full of women waiting for the sultan. It was a royal household, school, workplace, residence, and political machine. Hundreds of women could live inside it, from low-ranking novices to experienced servants, consorts, princesses, and the Valid Sultan, the sultan's mother. Senior women supervised junior women. Eunuchs guarded access and carried messages. Rank determined your work, your pay, your rooms, your clothing, your future, and sometimes how close you could get to the ruler. That meant the first rule was brutally simple: know your place. A newly arrived palace slave didn't walk in and start flirting with the sultan. She was trained. Language, religion, etiquette, sewing, music, household service, court behavior. The goal was to reshape her into a loyal servant of the dynasty. For many girls, the palace had already cut them off from their original families and communities, so obedience wasn't just good manners. The imperial household controlled the roof over your head, your salary, your advancement, and eventually the marriage or freedom that might come after palace service. Yeah, that's a lot of power to put over one person. The harem also ran on surveillance. Access to the women's quarters was restricted. Movement through palace spaces was controlled. Messages to the outside world passed through people who held rank and permission. The chief black eunuch became one of the most powerful figures in the court, partly because controlling access meant controlling information. If you were an ordinary servant, you couldn't just walk out, meet whoever you wanted, and come back before dinner. This was the private household of an emperor. Privacy worked for the dynasty, not necessarily for you. And discipline didn't have to mean execution to be terrifying. For a low-ranking woman, losing favor could destroy years of progress. Palace women existed in a ladder of positions, and promotion brought better pay, better work, better rooms, and stronger Besitzings. Falling out with a superior could send you in the opposite direction. Historical descriptions of harem discipline report beatings for insolence and removal to the old palace for persistent disobedience. We should be careful here. The surviving internal records tell us far more about salaries, ranks, training, and transfers than they do about every slap or beating behind closed doors. But the structure itself is clear. This was not an equal workplace where you could tell the boss to go to hell and update LinkedIn. Wrong century. Very wrong building. Then there was theft. This sounds almost ordinary until you remember where the theft was happening. The imperial harem contained jewelry, textiles, gifts, cash, and objects belonging to some of the most powerful women in the empire. Records and chronicles show that theft was a real problem inside the palace. In 1665, one account even connected a fire in the new palace with an attempt to conceal stolen jewelry. Imagine being a servant when valuables vanish from the room of someone who can ruin your life with a word. Suddenly, everyone is watching everyone. But the most dangerous rule wasn't written on a wall. It was this: never become the wrong person's enemy. Look at Mahidevran and Hurrem during the reign of Suleiman the Magnificent. Both women were connected to the Sultan and to rival lines of succession. A Venetian ambassador later reported that Mahidevran physically attacked Hurrem during their bitter rivalry. The story may have picked up embellishment in the retelling, but historians take the core incident seriously enough to discuss it. According to the report, Hurrem was beaten and scratched, and Suleiman was furious. Here's what makes the episode important. Mahidevran wasn't some powerless servant who broke a tiny housekeeping rule. She was the mother of Prince Mustafa, at one point the Sultan's most important surviving son. She had status, she had a future tied to her child, yet royal favor could shift, and once it shifted, status became frighteningly fragile. Hurrem increasingly dominated Suleiman's affection, while Mahidevran's position weakened. In this world, a fight between two women could become part of a much larger struggle over access, motherhood, succession, and survival. That's the hypocrisy of the system. The rules were strict, but they were never mechanically equal. A junior slave and the Sultan's favorite did not stand on the same floor. A woman protected by the Valid Sultan had something another woman didn't. A consort who gave birth to a prince had political weight. Favor could bend custom itself. Hurrem is the perfect example. Older Ottoman dynastic practice generally limited a concubine mother to one son and expected princely mothers eventually to accompany their sons to provincial posts. Hurrem broke that pattern spectacularly. She bore Suleiman several sons, remained at the center of court life, and eventually became his legal wife. So yes, rules mattered. But being loved by the man who ultimately embodied the rules mattered more. And then it gets worse, because harem politics could stop being about rank and turn into a struggle over who controlled the empire. Kösem Sultan reached the absolute summit. She had been a consort of Sultan Ahmed I, became mother of sultans, and later exercised enormous political influence. By 1651, the reigning Sultan Mehmed IV was still a child. Kosem, his grandmother, and Turhan Sultan, his mother, became rival centers of power. This wasn't a petty argument over jewelry or protocol. Their factions were tied to soldiers, eunuchs, ministers, and the question of who would control the young sultan. According to accounts of the crisis, Kosem was suspected of planning to remove Mehmed and replace him with another prince whose mother would be easier for her to dominate. Her enemies moved first. Now picture the palace at night. Corridors shut down, doors closed. Men loyal to Turhan's faction enter the harem complex looking for the most powerful woman in the Ottoman dynasty. Kosem reportedly tried to hide. She was found. She resisted. Then she was strangled inside the palace in September 1651. God, imagine that reversal. For decades, Kosem had been the woman other people feared. She had survived sultans, successions, rebellions, court factions, and the insanity of 17th century Ottoman politics. Yet when the balance shifted, the palace that had made her powerful became the place where she could not escape. No public trial, no dramatic speech from a courtroom. Her enemies got control of the doors, the guards, and the child sultan, and that was enough. This is why women feared breaking the sultan's rules in the Ottoman harem. The fear was bigger than one list of forbidden acts. The system controlled access, status, money, movement, information, and proximity to the dynasty. For an ordinary palace woman, disobedience could mean punishment, disgrace, or losing the future she had spent years building. For women near the throne, breaking protocol or joining the losing political faction could become a matter of life and death. And the cruelest part was that the safest rule was impossible to follow forever. Stay useful, stay loyal, stay protected, and never let power turn against you. Because once the footsteps stopped outside your door, the same walls that kept outsiders away could keep you trapped inside. Kösem Sultan learned that in 1651. The doors closed, her enemies entered, and one of the most powerful women in the empire died inside the harem that had once made her untouchable.